HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
Today's program is brought to you by Tabard Inn, new American cuisine in one of Washington, D.C.'s oldest hotels, located in DuPont Circle. For more information, visit tabardinn.com.
I'm Greg Blaze, host of Cutting the Curd. You're listening to Heritage Radio Network, broadcasting live from Bushwick, Brooklyn. If you like this program, visit heritageradionetwork.org for thousands more.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. We are coming to you from Midtown Manhattan. Our guest is Alice Paillard, co-director of Champagne Bruno Paillard. Alice will help us navigate through all things champagne. We will also taste the Paillard champagne for our weekly wine sip later in the show. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Okay, there are many sparkling wines made around the world, but what makes champagne champagne? What grapes are used for champagne? What is disgorgement? What is the difference between a vintage and a non-vintage champagne, also known as a multi-vintage, which we'll find out about? What is dosage? We'll get into all of that and more with our expert guest, Alice Paillard, because this is the Champagne Show. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Alice.
Thanks, Sam. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Alice is co-director of Champagne Bruno Paillard, located in the Champagne region of France. Little background. Her ancestors have been growers in Champagne since 1704. In 1981, Alice's father, Bruno Paillard, at the young age of 27, broke the traditional mold and famously went on to found his own champagne house. Now, he didn't just grow the grapes, which his predecessors did, he also made the wine. Alice is the only of her 4 siblings to join her dad in 2007. So she's been at this for a while. Alice, tell us a little about you, and tell us about your journey since you joined your dad, going back to 2007.
Well, the journey probably started before I was even conscious about it. But since when I was 15, I would have swore that I would never, ever join him, of course. but things changed because the passion about wine has been there for a long time. And I'm glad I joined him actually sooner than later, because we have very many different works within a champagne house. We must learn how to beautifully grow grapes. We must learn how to vinify. We must learn then how to take care of the aging and hold the financial of all this inventory. So a lot of jobs.
That's an important point for Paillard champagnes, because before the family was just growing grapes.
Yes.
And I assume they were selling them to other producers. You, as you stated, are growing and vinifying the grapes and all of that.
Yes, well, and actually, when my father started, it was not even growing because, as often in French law, the family vineyards went to the elder brother of my grandfather. My grandfather was not the elder brother, and as such, he didn't inherit vineyards. So the starting point for my father was from zero.
He purchased.
Exactly, he had to purchase.
And then he acquired land.
Exactly,
Right.
and so he started by vinifying, and in time too, he could become a grower as well, which makes the profile of our house quite unusual because we own. A house owns little vineyard generally and buys a lot of fruit, and we are the opposite of that by owning.
You make about 50% of the wine is made from your own vineyards?
And even a
Is
bit
that
higher,
typical
65.
of most champagne houses, or it varies, obviously?
No, it's really not. The average for a house is around 10% ownership.
Oh, so it's
yes.
substantially
Yes,
higher.
Yes.
Just go back for a minute, because you said when you were 15, there's no way you're getting into the business. I just want to know, between 15 and when you decided, what was the defining moment that you decided, I guess I'm going to do this or give it a try? What happened?
I guess a certain internal peace with yourself
Okay.
first to start with, and a way of thinking. Maybe I don't care so much about what people think. I care about what I want, and that's probably when it changed. And of course.
Wait, so it just didn't seem right or cool to go into the business because that's what you thought other people thought?
I couldn't stand the fact that people would tell me when I was 15, oh, you're going to work with your father, when my parents would never, ever tell me that themselves. And
Right.
I didn't like that idea.
So you've been with your dad, it's been, what, about 8-9 years?
Yeah, already, yeah.
So you obviously have a good relationship with him. When you initially decided to
Yes.
work with him,
Yes,
you
yes.
guys had a good relationship.
We do.
And tell me now, do you work closely? Do you take
Very
separate
closely.
tasks? You're both, very heavily into it?
Separate tasks is difficult because we're a small house. So at first I was really learning, you're still learning every day, of course.
You
but
never
I was,
stop learning.
Exactly. But I was very much in his first step, job by job, mission by mission. Then there is a certain stage when you feel like your own view is a bit different, so you start working more on your own, which is the case. But now we're together on most subjects because it's a small house, so
Right.
you can't really split the work.
But when something is obvious that either needs to be innovated or changed,
Yes.
I mean, you'll be passionate about convincing your dad or you that we need to do this, even though it bucks tradition.
Yes, absolutely. But I'm very lucky. He's an easy person to work with because he's everything but the generation you would imagine, very reserved on changing things. He's always been a very proactive character, so it's never complex to convince him of any changes.
So in your tenure there, I think you alluded to it, you started at every level.
Yes.
I mean, you were out in the farm, the fields, you made wine, the cellars, which we'll talk about a little, which are not cellars at Paillard. It's above ground, right? All right, so let's talk about champagne. I mean, your life is surrounded by champagne, so there's nobody better to tell our listeners about champagne. So the first obvious question is, not all sparkling wine is champagne, correct?
Oh, not even. You know what? If you look at all sparkling wines produced around the world, champagne is not even 10% of it.
Okay, so what makes champagne champagne?
It's geography. The first thing you learn about wine, when you start learning about wine, you learn the definition of terroir. And terroir is the combination of a land, a climate, and people. And Champagne is before anything a region limited, which is northeast of Paris and the northern side of France. And actually, when you look at European vineyards, it's the most northern one. And it's very interesting to understand that because it's completely influences all the centuries of practices after that.
Right.
Geography has often explained history.
Right. Did they recently, I don't know how long ago, expand Champagne? Did they?
I understand where your question comes from. Expansion, no, actually revision of the area, of the map, absolutely. But Champagne has been reduced in the past. If you look at, you might have heard of Phylloxera, which came from you, friends, our American friends. Phylloxera was
Phylloxera is a vine disease that can devastate wines, grapes, vineyards, and all of that. That's what Alice is alluding to.
Yeah, because it came from America and it arrived in Bordeaux in the end of the 19th century. Yes, 19th century.
Malbec didn't do well with phylloxera and the cold and all that, so they didn't grow as much.
Exactly, and so all European vineyards, without exception, was completely destroyed by that. And it's interesting to observe. Today's surface of Champagne appellation is 33,000 hectares. I'm sorry, I don't know in acres what it means. But before Phylloxera, it used to be 80,000.
Oh, so
You see?
It wasn't replanted?
No.
Why? People just gave up, or?
A part of that, yes, absolutely, because a lot of families were absolutely ruined with phylloxera. And then people forget that First World War happened, and it happened there. The Marne battle, the Verdun, the Champagne was in the middle of it. And there was a moment of potential reconstruction of the Champagne vineyards. Arrived First World War, arrived the Russian Revolution, arrived the crisis here in America. So all the export markets of Champagne were also completely closed, and it was a very, very tough time. So only a few people replanted bravely, if I can say that's correct English, to kind of defend the appellation, but a lot of it never was replanted.
So Champagne is Champagne because it is grown within a designated region.
Absolutely.
And as you said, the region was larger, and due to disease, phylloxera, it shrunken down, but it's still a robust area. Within Champagne, do the terroirs, do the soils vary from one area to another, or it's generally, because you can go to Napa and on one winemaker's vineyard he has lava, he has limestone, he's on a lake, and is the terroir different all over? It's
very interesting because Champagne is not very big, but it's very spread for the simple reason that because we're this very northern vineyard, the vine can only carry a nice and mature fruit on slopes. But someone who visited Champagne already realizes there are very few slopes. There are a lot of fields for kilometers, for miles of cereals and beetroots and potatoes. So, and then suddenly a hill and slopes and vines. So that means kind of small islands of vineyards. And so different realities of altitude, exposure, and soil.
What the slope helps with exposure, it just positions the vines and the grapes better.
With a better sun exposure.
But Champagne is not very slopey or hilly, you're saying.
No, exactly. Okay. So, but there is the more beautiful and noble soil that we're looking for in Champagne is the chalk, the famous belemnite chalk, which is nothing but the concretion of shells a million of years ago when it used to be a sea. But of course you also have clay, you also have sand, you also have argile, you have various types of soil.
So different vines are growing in, some vines are growing in chalky soil, some are growing in limestone. But you blend, so you tend to get a mixture of the terroir. Is that fair?
You do blend, but what you will blend is up to your vision. You can choose not to.
That's what makes Paillard. You're blending and all of that. All right, so let's talk about. So Champagne is a designated region. Anything outside of Champagne is not Champagne. It's a sparkling wine. So let's talk about how Champagne is made. I guess with regular wine, the grape is crushed, fermented, and aged. I think Champagne requires not different, but more steps.
Yes.
So tell me as simplistically as you can.
The beginning is exactly the same.
Growing grapes. Are we going
Harvesting,
back that far?
Yeah.
Harvesting, growing.
Crushing separately and vinifying apart. Not only grape by grape, but I'm speaking obviously of serious producers,
Right.
but village by village, and if possible, parcel by parcel, which is even better. And after a few months, it's, for us, we always do that much later because time matters. It's the moment of assemblage, the moment of tasting each of them and choosing
When
what
you say
should-
later, you pick later?
No, we blend much later.
You blend later.
By
You
law,
hold on to the wine.
exactly. By law, you can blend and bottle your wine as early as January after harvest. But if you want to make a good one, you need more time. It's
And
impossible.
time is money, so you're
Exactly.
investing time, which costs money to produce
Yes,
what
exactly.
you feel is, the wine that you want, which
But-
is a quality wine.
But to do a good assemblage, you need to taste not what you like right now, but what you anticipate the wine will become with a second fermentation, more years of aging. So if you don't give it enough time in the first place, you've no idea. It's like asking a 5 years kid, what do you want to do when you grow old? You need
No
to give
idea.
it time.
Right.
Exactly. So, so this, for a serious producer, blending should happen in the spring. And then once you've decided your assemblage by, okay, let's put this village, etc., you physically do it, and then the wine is put inside the bottle. Whereas the second fermentation will happen the exact same way than the first fermentation. It's always sugar transforming into alcohol and producing CO2. But the difference is that this time it's in the sealed bottle, by opposition to an open barrel or tank.
Right.
So the CO2 that's produced cannot escape from the bottle, and it is dissolving into the wine. And because this CO2...
Does that have a name?
Second fermentation.
It's second, that's what it is. Second,
Exactly.
Which is in bottle, closed,
Exactly.
all the gases and everything.
And because the molecule of CO2 is bigger than the one of oxygen, it creates a pressure inside of the bottle. And that's the birth of the effervescence of champagne. And this second fermentation, it's extremely important that it happens in a cool cellar. This is why traditionally the older houses created 2 or 3 centuries ago had underground cellars because it was the only way
Naturally
to go.
cool.
Exactly,
Right.
cool and stable. And so why is that? Because the cooler the temperature, the slower will be the second fermentation, and the more gentle and delicate the aromas will be
So
in
you
the
want
bubble.
slow, which is gentle, which benefits the final product.
Absolutely, and very, very creamy and tiny bubbles in the end. And
Is tiny bubbles what you aim for?
yes,
That's a
always.
finer
It
champagne,
is.
tiny bubbles.
So very, very much so.
Go back for a second, because to make champagne,
Mm-hmm.
you need grapes. What kind of grapes are we talking about?
The 3 main grapes are Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier.
So
which are-
Chardonnay is a white grape, Pinot Noir is a red grape, and the third was
is Meunier is
also a red.
You're absolutely right. Yeah,
Right.
we do make a white wine with 2 black grapes and 1 white grape.
That's
which-
a Blanc de Blanc is all
Yeah,
white.
Exactly. This is why actually harvest is mandatory by hand in Champagne, because to make sure the juice remains as clear as possible and doesn't get tainted by the color which lies in the skin of the grapes.
So if you do a rosé, then you leave it on the skins
At some
more?
stage, absolutely, yeah.
When you do a rosé, you're using Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier?
You
or-
can, it depends.
Okay.
You can. You can also
Do
use
you need-
Chardonnay.
You can?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. There's color in the skin to give it a little rosé quality?
You necessarily need some black grape, but I mean you can also have some Chardonnay in the blend if you want to.
So the majority, not the majority, the champagnes you make are blends?
Absolutely.
Do you do a Blanc de Blanc?
We do?
And then you blend, do you blend all 3?
All right. The notion of, that's a good point you're raising, blend or assemblage,
Assemblage.
relates to several things in Champagne. Before anything, assemblage of terroirs. Before the assemblage of grapes, you start by assembling parcels, which is what makes me say our Blanc de Blanc is an assemblage, because yes, you're right, it is only 1 grape actually, but it is 8 different terroirs, and also assemblage of different vintages together.
Right, which we'll get to.
Uh-huh.
So, do the wines, the champagnes, is there a similar structure historically as far as the assemblage, from different terroirs, or is it drastically different every time? I mean, you have to sort of stick to a formula, right? And then you tweak it, or does it really vary vintage to vintage?
Alors, it's exactly like a composition. If you take Beethoven's Symphony, for instance, it was conceived and written once, but then it is reinterpreted every time with a different orchestra, different instruments in different cities or places to play the music. It's exactly the same thing. The secret of each assemblage has been created once, but then you need to reinterpret it every vintage, every year, with what Mother Nature gives you, with the characteristic of each village, and the art of it is about replacing the right village by the other right village in terms of if you've had hail, if you had spring frost, if you just didn't agree with the character developed by that terroir.
That's
that year.
very personal.
And that's where the creativity comes in.
Right. Which makes every wine different, every vintage and all that. You have a thing called a pound a cup during crushing. Do you know what that is?
No.
You use the best juice.
Ah, yes.
To explain that.
Well,
when you crush the grapes, there's a certain amount of juice, and you use.
That's for us, Bruno Paillard.
Right, not everyone does that, which is another point towards quality.
But of course, I mean that's quite intuitive. I think everybody gets that the first part of the pressing is the purest one because you really extract what's in the heart of the grape, and while the second part of the pressing you start crushing a bit the seeds and the skin and the rafle, as we say in French. So obviously, in the second part of the pressing, you extract a bit of bitterness, which is interesting because when you just taste them at the very moment, one might prefer the second pressing because it's softer. But remember, we are aiming for something not that we like now, but what will become a beautiful wine later on.
So do people use a good amount of the second pressing, or most better champagne stay away from it? I know you do.
You should ask a question to ask to each.
Right, that's not a fair question, but it will appear.
But what I can say is we commit to using only the first one, and we write it on each bottle.
All right, so let's talk about some of these nerdy terms. Let's talk about what disgorgement is.
All right, so I will just go back a couple of minutes when we were talking of the process, bottling and second fermentation in a cool cellar. This second fermentation...
The wine is in the bottle, closed, sealed, the gases are sealed. That's the second fermentation.
Exactly, and in a cool cellar. And that's... Then you kind of hold on everything and you stop and you wait. Because...
How long are we talking about leaving the wine in the second fermentation in the bottle?
Alors, that's obviously there is a minimum set by law, which would say 15 months for a non-vintage champagne and 3 years for a single vintage champagne. And then, obviously, the law only sets a minimum. And again, if you want to make a serious wine, you need more time.
So time only benefits the quality.
Yes. If the first material in the bottle can stand it, of course. For us, the younger wine would be 3 years on lees. And why is that important?
Tell people what lees are.
Voilà, because the second fermentation won't last for 3 years. Even in a very cool cellar, it will be completed in 2 to 3 months. But what happens next? These yeasts that have done the second fermentation, they are alive, so they've consumed all the sugar, they've transformed it into alcohol, they've consumed all the oxygen, they've released CO2, and once they've done that, they die because they have nothing else to nourish them. And one could think they're useless, but they're not. They become lees. They become these famous sediments that lay on the bottle horizontally, and they are like a very thin couverture, if I could say, and this then starts this famous and very mysterious process of the autolysis. Autolysis is this self-destruction of the lees into tinier and tinier and invisible pieces that will mysteriously enrich the wine, nourish it, give it structure and body.
The visible lees disappear?
they don't completely disappear,
Completely,
but
but
some part of it do, and nourish the wine. And that's when, by leaving the wines on lees in the cellar for a long time, you give them more structure. And the thing is, obviously, when we consider the aging is over, we're not going to give you a champagne bottle with sediment inside.
Right.
So that's when disgorgement comes in, because we need to get rid of the sediment in the end of the process.
So disgorgement is the process of getting rid of the sediment,
Absolutely.
so that you have. Is it filtering or?
No, it's the bottle is laying down in the cellar for years. Then you have a short riddling process of a couple of weeks.
Explain what riddling is.
And riddling is simply the fact of bringing the bottle from horizontal to vertical position, head down, simply to
In racks.
Yes.
I mean, you have cellars with bottles
Absolutely.
pointed down.
And so that very, very gently the sediments will move towards the exit door, which is the neck of the bottle. And when they're absolutely ready, you have to do it quietly.
So that makes disgorgement easier by moving the sediment
Exactly.
up.
They are all concentrated nearby.
Now, riddling used to be, not used to, it was done by hand.
Mm-hmm.
I understand you have mechanical riddlers?
Yes.
Or some?
Well, riddling's been done by hands for a very, very long time. The thing is, you don't find anybody who wants to do that anymore.
No.
It's
So it's
tough.
mechanical?
It's a very not fun job at all.
So the wines are put in a large pallet
So
and
it's-
a machine.
There's a combination of two things. Yeah, first, nobody wants to do it, but also the riddling rights have been delivering beautiful quality results, because they do riddling is not what makes a good wine, but if it's not well
it's just
made,
a process to get.
But
the
if
sediment.
it's not well made, it can ruin a good wine.
Right.
So it's very important. And the key to a good riddling is the size of the movement that need to be very small, and the number of
the
movements.
actual movement of the bottle.
Exactly.
So that's a very
The
precise.
smaller they are, and
you
the
just
more.
can't have somebody come in and start spinning bottles
No,
around.
exactly. And the
Oh,
more
boy, I would've gotten
numerous,
fired.
the more numerous they will be, the brightest will the wine be in the end. So that's why that's what explains the success of zero palettes in Champagne, because they do that better than by hand.
All right, so let's keep the process going. So now the wine is in the bottle, second fermentation, pointed down, riddled to move the sediment up. It's ready for what now?
The famous disgorgement. The fact of opening the bottle a few seconds, letting some wines run through and together bring sediments, and then putting it up again and making sure no more wine is coming out. And because you've lost a bit of wine in the process, you need to top it up.
Right.
So you top it up with your reserve wines and the dosage that you've chosen to do.
Dosage is what?
And dosage is the level of sugar. Some wines are, you've heard of extra brut, brut champagne, demi-sec, sec.
Those are all levels of dryness.
Exactly.
But is dosage adding sugar?
It's adding reserve wines with a bit of sugar inside.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So how much you add determines how dry.
Exactly.
Okay.
For us, they're all extra bruts, which means very, very little dosage.
And one of the things you said a few times is longer maturation.
Yeah.
You, Paillard, is very patient. Quality is important, so you're willing to let wine sit there a lot longer.
The thing is, you can choose between time and sugar. Basically, I'm a
Right.
bit hard saying that, but if you want to seek for purity and low dosage in your wines, which is what we're doing, you need time, because
Right.
the first material has a very vibrant nervosity and acidity, and I use this word knowing that it's a scary word. Acidity, people are scared about that sensation that can be
Well, I
aggressive.
think once they understand what it is,
Exactly.
they realize it helps with food.
Exactly.
It gives the wine that feel. The term sounds intimidating, but it's important to what a good champagne or wine
Exactly,
is.
and more, and it depends all on how it's integrated.
Right.
You can choose to hide acidity with sugar. We'd rather not do that. We'd rather domesticate, civilize acidity with time. Hence the importance of the aging.
So Paillard is an innovator in some areas. You were the first to put disgorgement dates on the bottles.
Yes.
People weren't really doing that.
Absolutely.
Right.
The reason, well, it was my father Bruno had this observation. We've all done that. You're a party of 6, you go to the restaurant, you order a bottle of a champagne you like very much, it's delicious, you say, well, let's have a second bottle half hour later, and it's a second bottle from the exact same house, and you have the feeling to drink a different champagne. And very legitimately, you could think, well, that's not serious. Why would I have 2 different impressions
So by
from
matching the disgorgement gauge
Exactly.
will give you the
Exactly, because maybe simply because one bottle was a disgorgement from previous delivery a year ago,
So that
and
was
not
for
the
the
other one.
consumer,
Exactly.
just to give them more information.
Absolutely.
All right, we were talking about cellars, whittling, and all that. You built a state-of-the-art above-ground cellar, which is where you store your wines.
It is because
When did you do that?
in 1990.
Okay.
Yeah, because well, we never tried to make a fake old cellar. It was more about using the best of techniques to offer the best possible aging environment.
Right.
And the thing is, when you're if you choose to go underground, it means you have different levels of cellars, one underneath the other. And the problem doing that is that each level will have a different temperature. The best ideal temperature
This
is
is
only
uniformly controlled.
exactly.
What you did.
Otherwise, you need to go 35
Right.
meters underground to find the 10 and a half Celsius degrees we're
Right.
looking for.
And we talked about the mechanical pallets, which you adopted fairly early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it was at the same time that the building of the cellar,
Right.
so
it
it
made
w-
sense
yeah.
to automate there. And Bruno Paillard Champagne is still an independent, family-owned,
Entirely 100%.
which is not the case with a lot of champagne houses that roll off people's tongues, which is a nice thing. And you take a holistic approach to the business, right? Would you say that's a fair description?
I'll say you're well informed.
Okay. All right. So that's how we make champagne. That's how Bruno Paillard makes champagne. They do a bunch of things different. Time, some of their approaches. Did we miss anything?
Oh, no, but I could keep speaking for hours,
All right.
but I guess.
We'll move on to something else. I do a thing every week. It's called the wine list. Mm-hmm. And I didn't prompt you on this because I didn't want you to prepare. I'm going to ask you about 5 questions about wine. Now, it's tricky with you because you can answer with champagne and wine. So I'll prompt you as to what wines are you drinking right now? So, not champagne.
Not champagne, all right.
Just now, not, you
No,
know,
yeah,
has
but-
it been seasonal? Is there something you're loving?
Oh, what I would love. I love, as far as whites are concerned, if not champagne, I love to go to the Moselle.
German wines.
And some wonderful Rieslings.
I think Riesling is very underrated for
I
wine,
agree.
and the value is very good.
But if I go to reds, I would love the from the Rhone. I tend to go more either Northern Rhone, Saint Joseph, or also
You like
Southern Rhone.
Syrahs, bold Syrah?
Yeah, but on the Northern Rhone you have a lot of elegance too. You have maturity with refinement if you find the right
Right.
producers, and looking at the Southern Rhone, you have some very interesting things like in Ventoux, for instance, which is more Grenache, but here you have
Right.
Claude de Trias, for instance, which I like very much. Coming into this,
the
coming into the
Rhone
winter.
varietals, Grenache, Mourvedre,
Yeah, coming
all
into the
delicious.
winter, these are wines that are very, very interesting.
All right, your favorite wine and food pairing.
Uh-huh.
So we'll all say champagne and oysters, but now what's your favorite wine and food pairing?
Oh, but am I allowed to reply with champagne because it really is?
Yes, on this one you
Yeah.
can. So
Well,
what's your favorite champagne food pairing?
Alors, I'll be joking on that because this summer I had an amazing pairing I had never realized. It was just after a bath in the sea, a cup of rosé première cuvée, and I still had some salt on my lips. And that was a wonderful
So
pairing.
that-
A
okay.
sea bath with a glass of
Okay.
rosé champagne.
That could be on the top 5 of most interesting answers. How about your favorite wine restaurant or wine bar? And I'm going to give you 2 ways to answer. You're in New York now, and New York's a pretty damn good restaurant town. And you've also been in France, which is a great restaurant country in Europe. Do you have a favorite restaurant that you go into that has great wine service and the food and pairing everything?
Of course there are, but for me it's difficult to reply for New York because I haven't come in 2 years.
Okay, so then tell me at home or
yeah.
Europe.
Oh yeah, well, at home in Paris, I live in France, but in Paris I see a lot of energy in new places opening, and absolutely a place like Le Bon 5%, for instance, which is a bistro, but which was rated the very best bistro last year by the foodie in Paris.
In Paris?
Yes.
What's it called?
Le Bon 5%.
Okay.
It's really a place. I mean, you want to eat typical French cuisine
With
in a
good
not
wine service?
Exactly,
Okay.
with great wine service in an absolutely not pretentious area in the heart of Paris, behind Saint-Sulpice. It's so beautiful.
Nice.
It's really a nice address to try.
Not fancy,
No,
just casual.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
absolutely. You had another question, which was
Favorite wine restaurant or wine bar?
Yeah.
You answered it. We're going to move to the next one. Favorite all-time wine. So you get two answers. Favorite all-time champagne, and then is there a wine? Is it a birth year wine? Did you have is there a wine that just still resonates with you?
yes. I don't know, if I start with a non-champagne, it would probably be in 1982 Brand Cantenac,
Really?
which
Great producer, not one of the
No.
Grand Cru. I like to hear that.
I don't know if you can still find
82
some.
was you're right. You can. You just have to pay for it.
Yeah.
But a great vintage year. What about your all-time favorite champagne? I mean, the
You know
house
what?
has been around for.
You know what? Well, the thing I think that gave me most, all right, the striking one probably would have been the 96 Blanc de Blanc, which is a wine very deep, very vertical, very energetic, so that creates kind of extreme emotions. But in competition to that, the most memorable one I have tasted would be a very apparently simple Première Cuvée, which was disgorged 20 years ago. And that is extremely, creates a lot of emotion to understand how a non-pretentious wine,
Right.
how far it can go.
Right. We're going to taste a wine. We do a thing called the weekly wine sip, and you were kind enough to bring a Paillard champagne, and we're going to break in a minute. But I forgot to get to one area which is important to Bruno Paillard, and people know wine as vintage wines. You know, here's a 1982, here's a 2002. But a lot of wine people purchase is non-vintage. You call it something else. You call it multi-vintage, which is brilliant because explain what a multi-vintage is. You know, that the house has all these vintages and they mix.
The thing with non-vintage is we don't like that term so much for two reasons. The first one is that it's negative, and the second one is that it doesn't mean what the wine is. It just means what it's not. It comes from the opposition to a vintage. A single vintage champagne is a wine made exclusively from one harvest, while a multi-vintage is a wine made from several different vintages together. And in as far as we're concerned,
of which you have reserves of these vintages.
This is what
for
I call
blending.
the reserve ones.
So your current non-vintage can have wines blended from as far back as when?
In our case, as far back as 85.
Okay. I think that's a pretty nice thing when you're picking up a...
That's unique, actually, in Champagne, absolutely.
All right, so that covers multi-vintage. All right, we're going to do our weekly wine sip. You'll stay and you'll join in drinking, and I want you to kind of walk us through the wine. We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network.
following program has been brought to you by Tabard Inn. Tabard Inn, Washington, D.C.'s quintessential small hotel, is located on a quiet, tree-lined street just 5 blocks from the White House. Vibrant yet unassuming, the Tabard is comprised of 40 sleeping rooms, each unique in character and design. Feast on eclectic American cuisine in their acclaimed restaurant, or enjoy a cocktail and listen to live jazz in one of their cozy Victorian seating areas. Mingle with travelers from around the world who find the Tabard the only place to stay when taking their travels to Washington. For more information, visit tabardinn.com.
All right, we're back. We're back with our weekly wine sip. Every week we taste a different wine on air. For this week's weekly wine sip, Alice Paillard from Champagne Bruno Paillard will join us for the wine sip, and she has brought us a bottle of champagne. We'll be tasting the mixed vintage Bruno Paillard Extra Brut Champagne. So let's pop it open, pour it, and tell me a little about this wine.
Here we are, Sam. Watch out. Here we are.
The best part was when your beautiful hair kind of poofed. That was nice. That's a visual you won't get on here.
There's a lot of life in the bottle.
Yes.
This wine is called Première Cuvée, which stands for first pressing. We mentioned earlier the notion of the importance of the first part of the pressing. Alors, first thing is, of course, if you can choose a glass, the ideal shape is what we call the tulip shape, which is a V in the bottom part, which allows the bubbles to grow, and a larger belly in the center, so that there is enough aeration for the wine.
So flutes are passé.
Actually, the tulip is a type of flute that would be a mixture between the straight flute and a Burgundy glass, ideally.
Right.
So here...
So the color is...
Well, first you can look, if you have the proper glass, you will see a nice effervescence that's very, very tiny. We learn to look at the color of a wine on something white, and here you see, we call it a straw gold color, which means it's a fairly yellow gold that shows the presence of black grapes as well as white grape.
Right.
But then also use something black to see the bubbles, because when they're very, very small, they appear like tiny white dots and almost invisible in the wine. So you see them better.
You see different things against the darker.
Exactly.
All right, so let's take a sniff.
Oh, sniff, absolutely. Thanks for smelling it first. I appreciate that.
I think that's very important.
It is, because it's
it has a very prominent nose. Mm-hmm. Now describe to me what we're getting in the nose. I know what I'm getting, but I want to hear it from you.
The thing is, and I feel that smelling it is a part of the pleasure too. So the first nose is a bit more dominated with citrus, which come from the Chardonnay, but soon after you have a bit of the rounder fruit of the Pinot, a bit of the red currants, and a bit of the blackberry, and a bit of the spicy notes as well that are arriving.
So you're getting citrus, you're getting some black fruit, you're getting some red fruit.
And a bit of spiciness coming gently.
From where? From any particular grape?
It could be one of the Pinot more.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's taste.
Notes.
So we want good health. We want to talk about mouthfeel, the bubbles, the effervescence, the acidity, and then flavor.
Absolutely. They're
delicious. So what are we tasting?
First, there are 3 moments important in the mouth. The arrival of the wine on the palate, which we call the attack, and then the central sensation when it's in the middle of the mouth.
Mid-palate.
Exactly, and the finish.
This is a long finishing chance. I still have.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
I mean, I got the attack and the mid-palate, but it's a few seconds later, it's still sitting there.
I hope you would agree that the attack is quite frank, a bit sharp, but not aggressive. And then real rich presence on the palate with a slight salivation on side, and very long and persistent with an almost salty finish, which is a bit surprising.
Not overpowering salty, but a little salinity.
Exactly.
More salinity than salt, because when you think of salt, you think of top of French fries or something.
No, not at all.
Which is not what we're thinking.
But it's all about looking for the balance between a substance and real character on the palate, but in an elegant manner, not in
Very
a heavy
elegant.
manner.
What grapes are in this champagne?
We have a touch of Meunier, 22%, a lot of Pinot Noir, 45%, and 33% Chardonnay.
Okay, so it's a blend of all those grapes. Availability, we checked. This is a champagne that is available at most and better wine and liquor stores. The retail on this is approximately how much?
Approximately $50.
So it's a $50 bottle of champagne that I think drinks for, what tastes like considerably more money. So this is the mixed vintage, which you will now use in your vocabulary because you're going to drop non-vintage.
Too melty.
Because Alice told you that it's a negative term, and I think she's right. It's the mixed vintage Bruno Paillard Extra Brut Champagne. All right, thank you for bringing that, Alice. Finally, wait, did you want to say something? All right, so we're going to wrap up the show. Finally, to find out about great wine events and tastings in your area, go to localwineevents.com and plug into your city. There's a diversity of interesting wine events every week. If you have a wine happening or event or something interesting, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's Sam at the Grape Nation. We will also post Alice's wine list answers, and we will post the weekly wine sip, the champagne we tasted, and we'll give you some of the descriptors. Thank you, Alice, for being our guest.
Thank you so much, Sam.
You really upped our knowledge of champagne, and we appreciate that. Thank you, Alice Paillard, co-director of Champagne Bruno Paillard. Thank you to our engineer, Pierre, and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. Go to heritageradionetwork.org for more info. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this program on heritageradionetwork.org. You can find all of our archived programs on our website or as podcasts in the iTunes Store by searching Heritage Radio Network. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at @heritage_radio. You can email us questions at any time at info@heritageradionetwork.org. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization. To donate and become a member, visit our website today. Thanks for listening.